Get started today. So today we're going to primarily focus on is the bull and the bear. And at the end of class today, we'll talk about the ROIC super tree and your assignments for next week. Okay? So let's start out with the bull and the bear. I posted to Elms under the files section here, under the folder, where did I put it? KO. Were the files that we use in Monday's class, including for the Monday extra credit. So whether you want to use your file, if you were able to do the extra credit, or you can download this file, but this is where we're going to pick up where we left off on Monday. So back to our files. So basically, this is the model that we left off with on Monday. Okay? And what I want to do, file, save as, is first thing I want to do is I want to add some additional data to the ratios tab. So I want you to add these additional fields. So we had a forecast share price and a current share price. I want you to add these additional 6 rows. So first, current enterprise value to sales multiple. Okay, so where that comes from, this is not yellow, is from our model. We already have a current EV to sales here in the assumptions tab. I just want to refer to that in the ratios. Then I want to put a forecast EV to sales, which is in the multiples tab. This was the EV to sales created by our model based on the forecasted share price. Okay, so we got a current and forecast, just like we do with the share price. Right? Same thing with EV to EBIT. So in the ratios tab, I want to do a current EV to EBIT, which is the current trading multiple at the time of the valuation, which we had put into our assumptions tab. So it's referring to that number, E10 or E11 off the assumptions, and the forecast EV to EBIT off of the multiples, which would have been F1 when we built out the changes of the model. And then finally, E1 is EV to EBITDA, and G1 is the PE. I want to do a forecast EV to EBITDA, which is E1 off the multiples, and a forecast PE, which was G1 off the multiples. So basically putting in the second forward year estimates created by our model to match against some of the data that we're observing in the real world, right? And we talked about on Monday how this was a sanity test and sanity check in our valuations. We were going to look at our valuation, we're going to look at the multiples we came up with, and we're going to compare them against real world multiples to help us make sure that we didn't get too aggressive. Okay? So I wanted to add that to the ratios so that as we're doing our valuations, we're not just looking at the forward share price, we're looking at the multiples that our forward share price would then infer, the implied multiples, so that we further help us make sure we don't get too far out of line. Okay? So it'd be one thing to say Coke should have a $50 stock price. What are the multiples of a $50 stock price? And does that seem reasonable given the multiples in the industry? So that's kind of the question that we want to ask. All right? So what we then want to move into today is, as I said, the bull and the bear scenario. So for valuations, we will always do 4 valuations in this class. Right? Monday for Coke, we did the as is. And so the as is based on the current share price, and we get a better understanding of what the drivers of that current share price are. So then what we next want to do is we want to do the bull and the bear. The bull and the bear is the potential range that this company could get to in the next 12 or so months. Okay? So the next year, if everything goes right for this company, how high could it trade? We're going to call that our bull. Right? And then if everything goes wrong, how bad could it get? we're going to call that our bear. Okay, so that's going to establish a top end and a bottom for the range at which we think this company could end up sometime in the next 12 months. Now, the question today is, how do we come up with a reasonable range? Okay, I'll just give you a quick example of this. Because if I looked at Coke, and I see they've been struggling with growth, but if I said, well, for a bull, let's say instead of 1% growth, they get 5% growth for the next 4 years. Not going to change anything else, just 5% growth, and that's my bull, right? Doesn't sound too unreasonable to say 5% growth versus 1% growth, right? And here's the key. What that would mean is that would be a $49.49 stock price. And that would mean that they would trade at 23 times EBIT versus 20 and 27 PE, and they would trade at 20.49 times EBITDA. Well, if I go over to my multiples, a $49.50 stock price, when I compare these multiples, which is the almost $50 share price, with what I see in the industry, there's nobody that's trading at almost 8 times enterprise value to sales. There's nobody in this industry trading at a 20.5 times EV to EBITDA multiple. There's nobody in this industry trading at 23 times EBIT. And even a 27 PE is just a couple of very small, very fast growing companies. So the point is, where 5% might sound like not a bad number for a bull case scenario, when you look at the likelihood of them achieving that, because what we're actually saying is 5% growth at the highest margins in the industry, right, in an industry that is struggling with growth to begin with, is actually going to be really challenging. And there's no one that's getting the type of multiples that would represent in the industry. So I'm not saying that it's not impossible, but if I were to think of this as a 90% confidence interval between the bull and the bear, like this would truly probably be an outlier in the next 12 months. Like I don't think Coke is going to get 5% growth at these margins in the next 12 months on a consistent basis, right? Because the trading multiples to do that, no one in this industry gets that kind of growth and margin combination. No one's expected to do that. So it would have to be a true exception, not just for Coke, but for anyone in this industry. So what I'm saying is that we use the multiples as a sanity check, not only for our final valuation, but even when we do our scenarios, because it's not just about forecasting stock price, we actually are forecasting multiples, and multiples are based on expectation, expected growth, return combinations. So we just want to make sure that we don't put in assumptions that we suddenly think are reasonable that lead to potentially unreasonable results. And so that's the additional aspect that I want to do with this multiple triangulation to help us as we build out our models. Right? The other thing I want to mention as you do your bull and a bear is you don't want to just be arbitrary. Right? And what I mean by arbitrary is a lot of you will just do plus or minus 20% of the stock price. Well, that's about as meaningless as it can possibly get, right? Because why 20%, right? So it's not the plus or minus 20% that matters to the scenario, because maybe it's not plus or minus 20%, maybe it's a different percentage. What matters more is the assumptions, okay? So what are the assumptions to the bull? And what are the assumptions that lead to the growth rate that you put in? What are the assumptions that lead to the margin? And what are the catalysts that would cause that to happen? And what are the catalysts that would cause the bear to happen? So what matters more, and this is really hard to do because a lot of people don't do this, right, is to talk through the assumptions behind the scenario. And that's what I want you guys to start to practice to do. So for the next 20 minutes, in-class exercise, right, this is not graded, so you can partner up with somebody, but I want you to do a bull and a bear on Coke, okay? And basically in 20 minutes, I want you to tell me what you think it should be. And I want you to do things like look at, for example, the BICO in Bloomberg. So if I were to go to Coke, so KO US equity, and if I go to Bloomberg Intelligence on the company, like there is data on the company and the industry. Look through that. That will help you understand the bull and the bear scenario. Look at the ANR. Look at where the analysts are for Coke. You'll see that the average target price for Coke suggests in the next 12 months a 2% potential upside, right? So not saying that that's your bull, but it's just saying that analysts aren't expecting a lot of great things from Coke anytime in the next 12 months. And so they're going through some very challenging times. So that's just data that will help us as we start to create the scenarios and what's driving those scenarios. So you'll start to see some industry data, start to see some company specific data. In addition, if you had time, you might want to look through IBIS World. Okay, so there's industry reports on Coke and what's going on. So again, this is a real class. We use real sources. But the point here is, at least for the next 20 minutes, split up into teams of 2 or 3, work with partners, practice creating the bull or the bear for Coke, and then let's talk about it in about 20 minutes. So 2 files you're going to create, one Excel file called bull, one called bear, right? And then number 2, talk through your assumptions. And what I'm more interested in hearing is what are the assumptions you changed and why, and what was the rationale for creating the bull, the optimistic scenario, and the bear scenario, right? And so again, we'll talk through that in about 20 minutes. Go.